session is going to reflect on the future of higher education in an increasingly complex world, exploring tools that students are going to need in the coming years in terms of their education. So it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. So I'll start right in the middle. Dr. Selma Botman is our Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs. Provost Botman has dedicated her career to higher education and has served in leadership positions at the University of Massachusetts, University of Southern Maine, and the City University of New York. Dr. Botman is also a scholar of modern Middle Eastern politics and society. She's also taught a number of courses at Stern College. She has published 3 books and a number of scholarly articles on the topic and has taught a range of courses on the modern Middle East and international development. On your left, to my right, Rabbi Dr. Josh Joseph is Yeshiva University's Senior Vice President, where he has operating responsibility for the administrative and academic aspects of the university. Recently, Rabbi Joseph defended his dissertation, earning his doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania in Higher Education Management. Rabbi Dr. Josh Joseph received rabbinic ordination from REITs as well, as master's in a Jewish philosophy from Bernard Revel Graduate School. And over here on your right, Daphne Kohavy is the Senior Instructional Technologist at YU, where she develops and delivers technical training sessions and workshops to faculty. Daphne works with a wide range of multimedia software, bringing information technology to academic programs and initiatives. Previously, Ms. Kohavy was on faculty at CUNY and Berkeley College. Ms. Kohavy received her master's degree from New York Institute of Technology in Instructional Technology, as well as an MS in Secondary Education from Queens College. Please enjoy this session on higher education.
Thank you very much, Talia. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, just checking. As I was walking up the steps to come to the session, one of the thoughts that occurred to me about change, which we're going to talk about today, is how rapid it can be and how persistent, how long it sometimes can last. In May, I did something a little crazy. I ran a marathon. I've been told since I started working at Yeshiva University, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I figured, well, I've been working here for 12 years, maybe I'll try it out. Apparently you need a different kind of training though. And I started off with a pack, and it was exciting, it was exhilarating. I was running faster than I had ever run before. And about halfway through the marathon, half of the people left because they were running a half marathon. Information I probably should have researched before I started. And then I was all alone. And it felt a little bit good that I felt like, wow, I was at the head of the pack, until the people passing me on the other side who were way ahead of me, I realized that I was not at the head of the pack. And that's when I realized the persistence of change and the need to keep going with your original plans and alter them a little bit. Maybe slow down a little bit sometimes, maybe even walk, maybe stop and have a little water. And I want to use that metaphor just to introduce the session today. We just heard from Rabbi Glasser in his introduction of Noah and his family stepping off the ark into a brand new world. And sometimes it feels we wake up in the morning and it's a brand new world from the world we've been in yesterday in higher education and here at Yeshiva University. And then we heard from both Rabbi Lamb and Rabbi Sachs about the persistence of change within education as well. And we're going to dive in today in this session into the changes in higher education, into the opportunities in higher education that are presenting themselves. It is a period of great innovation in the field of post-secondary education. The who, what, where, when, how, and even why of education continues to change at a fast pace. For example, who? We are not just talking about 18 to 24-year-olds on the undergraduate basis. Higher education is much broader, dealing with the continuum of those we educate. 2, what are we educating? Skills, knowledge. Which skills, which knowledge? We're going to dive into that today as well. Where are people learning? In class, at work, while they're driving, doing all kinds of things. When are they learning? During the day, in the evenings, on weekends, in summers? How are they learning? Do you have a panel of educators a sage on the stage? Or are you learning in collaborative labs, in other kinds of opportunities? And finally, the why of education. Knowledge creation, career advancement, or other things that we'll hear from our panelists today. The goal of our session is to explore the future of higher education in an increasingly complex and technologically evolving world. Specifically, we're asked to consider two questions. What tools will students need to confront tomorrow's challenges? I would say even today's challenges. And second, should we expect current models of education to continue, or, as we've been hinting, is there major change on the horizon? So I wanted to start with Dr. Botman. Thank you for being here with us today. Higher education is indeed changing, and competition seems to be coming from all over. Open access to educational resources online, for example, which has led to further disruption. The workforce is also changing. I recently was talking with a friend of mine who's a hedge fund manager who made the comment to me that he thinks that his job will be obsolete in 5 years, which was stunning and frightening. And Thomas Friedman, in an op-ed to the New York Times just last spring, suggested that by the time a first-time on-campus student, a freshman, reaches her or his 4th year, the skills and knowledge that she or he has learned might already be obsolete. Dr. Botman, what is higher ed doing about these changes to react and or get ahead of them?
So thank you, Rabbi Dr. Josh Joseph, and thank you to all of those who are attending the panel this morning. Higher education has never been under greater assault, and it has never been more important for society and for the individual. What happens in a university is not only skills and knowledge acquisition, it's maturity. It's modeling the behavior of faculty and staff whose disposition is toward continuous learning. I actually have a lot of respect for Thomas Friedman, and I fiercely disagree with the statement that he made in the New York Times. It happens to, I'm an historian, so it happens to be important to me that people know which millennium something happened in. Or, who was accomplishing change? And I don't just mean kings and queens and political leaders, but people accomplishing change as well. So I think it is important that we impart the love of learning and the learning details, because it makes for educated men and women. But most importantly, it's a disposition. We help students understand that the world needs them to impact it, to change it. It's a frightening, challenging, and chilling world. And unless we educate young people, middle-aged people, and older people about the challenges that we all face, we will be the worse off for it. And so what is higher education doing? Higher education is rethinking how it teaches, what we call pedagogy. When I went to college, professors stood at the front of the room and read their notes, which perhaps they had written 20 years earlier. Today, faculty members engage in conversation with students, and students engage in conversation with one another. And that conversation continues outside the classroom. So it's not just what happens for 50 minutes while students are sitting together with a teacher. Faculty are also introducing technology into the curriculum. There's a vast amount of information available, and we want students to have it at their fingertips. So technology is, in fact, changing the way we teach and the way students learn. What employers tell us is they want employees to have honed the soft skills, speaking, analyzing, working in groups. Those are skills and characteristics and attributes that people learn in college. Faculty are introducing project-based learning, meaning applied learning. They give students a real-life problem and ask students to think about solving that problem. And so faculty are thinking about how not just to deliver knowledge, but to get students to create that new knowledge as well. So I'm very confident about the future of higher education, despite it being in a transitional phase at this time.
Thank you. Building off of that, in Teaching Minds, How Cognitive Science Can Save Our Schools, one scholar, Schenk, espouses moving from content-based instruction to cognitive-based learning assisted by good teaching. Current structures not only fail to support this approach, according to him, but actively discourage new educational modalities. He suggests that we cannot simply fix higher education institutions by making them more friendly or safe. Rather, we must fundamentally change our conception of the role of post-secondary schooling, which will better serve their missions and the ultimate integration of higher education with global socioeconomic need through skills-based teaching. Others vigorously disagree. So, Daphne, thank you for being here. What are the top specific skill sets for the 21st century?
Sure. So the traditional walls of the classroom have been or are being broken down through technology. And I would argue that higher education is really the best place for this to happen and to show itself. In the next generation, we want to enhance skills such as innovation and problem solving. We want to charge our learners with knowing how to not just pose problems, but solve those problems through critical thinking and problem solving. But increasingly, it's a little bit of our duty to teach them also to still be present. We live in a society where interaction with screens sort of surpasses interaction with people, although Jonathan Sachs argued that that's not the case, and he's right. We do have the chore of educating people for appropriate uses of technology. I think that in the next generation, social and emotional intelligence should prevail in classrooms, and new models should appear to make those capabilities evident in the students that we graduate from our universities.
That's great. So I just want to keep it here a little bit. Dr. Botman, in your 4 or 5 years since you started working, because at only 27, it can't be that you started that long ago, you must have seen from UMass to CUNY to being president at Southern Maine and now being here at YU, different subjects that are of interest and needed. What are the next generation areas of knowledge that students should be focused on, or that the institutions themselves should be offering programs in?
So increasingly, students in the social sciences and the humanities are learning business skills. They're learning coding skills, so that they're embracing technology, embracing the new knowledge that is coming out as a result of the technological revolution that we're going through. So I do believe that science students should understand some business. Science students should understand, obviously, some humanities. And of course, in most universities, including ours, we have a core curriculum in which we educate men and women to be citizens. And in educating people, we are encouraging them to understand the world, to be flexible, to recognize that they have an obligation to impact that world. So I do think that the most sought after new areas will include those in technology, a new understanding of business education, and also the health area. We have increasingly a geriatric population, and it is going to be, we will need more people who are trained in the health sciences, in a broad way. But what I'm arguing for is what we in higher education call the interdisciplinarity of knowledge. So even though you may study philosophy, you should learn some coding. Even though you might be an accounting major, you should understand philosophy and history. If you're a computer scientist, then you also should understand how technology has changed your world. So the more we're able, and this is disruption as well, so computers have disrupted the world, but interdisciplinarity has also disrupted knowledge, for the better, I would say. Because we learn how other people in other disciplines approach the same problem. And so solving problems can be a team effort rather than an individual effort.
Just staying on that point, Daphne, when you're very involved here at YU in training and working with faculty in terms of curriculum development, in terms of course development, are you seeing any changes between the humanities on the one side or people coming in computer science or the sciences in other side in terms of who is more engaged in learning sort of some of these new modalities? Do you see this interdisciplinarity in terms of how you present, in terms of who you're working with and what you're working on?
I think that all faculty want the best for their students, and if that involves learning new skills and changing the paradigm, then that's something that will be attainable. In the work with faculty, there's very much of a paradigm shift happening. So there's the question of what is my identity? Originally I was a sage on the stage. Then they told me I have to learn pedagogy. Now they're telling me that I have to learn technology. Well, I have my own beliefs about technology. I want it in my classroom or I don't want it in my classroom. But through the work of many people out there, the notion exists that technology outside makes the classroom inside really, really much more effective. And as I mentioned earlier with 21st century skills, the role of the faculty member increasingly needs to be about not just content delivery, but creating learning experiences for students. And that's where someone like me comes in with how do we create authentic experiences for students in my classroom. And if I'm teaching a course like biblical history, how do I make that relevant for students? But I'm here to tell you that was always a question, whether technology was involved or was not involved. In the classroom, we have to keep our audience really in mind. And I'm there to sort of help faculty question their assumptions, realize that it's okay to question your assumptions, realize that we have just a more diverse audience in our class. And at the end of the day, the goal of the educator is really to have a great experience yourself, to be passionate, enthusiastic for your discipline and transfer that to your learners, whether you're teaching speech pathology or history or biblical studies. Technology outside can actually make the classroom inside more effective. And that's why universities are increasingly employing people like me to be either the pedagogue or the subject matter content curriculum developer, or simply the instructional technologist here to teach some technical skills. But it is a diverse world, and we have to, all of us, really be open to change. And that's really the beauty of being in a learning hub, and that's what keeps education so exciting.
So I would just like to comment on that. One of the joys of being in a university is that you're constantly surrounded by smart people. And people who are constantly learning and thinking. So with regard to Daphne's role, what I find so important is that you're asking faculty to think about outcomes of a class. What do you want students to know and be able to do at the end of this class? What is your goal for a class? Now, I can tell you when I started teaching decades ago, no one asked that question. And I find it very refreshing and important, especially as we move from a faculty-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. And what I mean by that is really understanding the audience. Who are these students? How do they learn? How are they interacting with technology? And I can assure you, and I know you'll agree, that the students are far more sophisticated with technology than we are. It's generational. And so engaging technology in the classroom, it is just a tool. It doesn't replace the faculty member. It doesn't replace the learning that goes on between the faculty and the students and one another.
And I would add, it actually highlights the role of educators and faculty members, because it says, in a Google it world, it says, okay, they can Google that, but they can't Google my feedback. So if I'm the expert in the classroom and I've spent X amounts of years in my discipline, the feedback that I provide for my students is really what counts. So it's just a shift. It's definitely not replacing anyone, and all the work that instructional technologists or instructional designers do begins by asking what's worthy of understanding in your class. That's not a technical centered question at all. That is very simply, in 5 years, what do you want your students to know? So when I was a history teacher, it wasn't dates and times, it was people. Know this about mankind. So.
That was such an incredible response that things are falling apart. You know, it's interesting, the dichotomy between information gaining and knowledge gathering on the one hand and expertise on the other hand. So as I was registering for my junior year, my third year in college, I realized that if I took an extra course or two for the second semester, I could graduate college. And I went to a couple of my professors, one in the business school and one in the humanities, and I asked what I should take in order to be able to graduate. And they both had the same response, which is, are your parents pushing you to get out of here quicker than everybody else? And I said, well, no, I frankly hadn't spoken to them about it. And they both encouraged me to take the next semester and the next year to develop myself as a student. And so I spent the next year and a half, thank you, Jay. I spent the next year and a half studying things that I would never have studied. I took a class in Russian literature. I took a class in art history. I took a class in music. I took a class, I ended up writing a thesis. I did an honors thesis. And through these experiences, I learned more than the previous couple of years than I could have possibly imagined. Today, the BA, the undergraduate degree, is almost under assault. It is accused by scholars. It is sometimes criticized by parents and students themselves. Just give me what I need in order to get that first job. And yet, then they find that after that first job, or maybe that second job, because perhaps they ran through their undergraduate education and didn't get a broad base, that sometimes runs into challenges and sends them back to the classroom or back to online opportunities and so on and so forth. Can you speak to the wisdom or perhaps the problem with undergraduate education at 3 years or 4 years? Or how do we look at that undergraduate education? Is it something where we should be saying, we got to cut it down, make it 2 years, right? There's a movement in law schools now to look at, instead of it being a 3-year graduate program, to a 2-year graduate program. Is that something we should be thinking about? How do we look at the liberal arts, the humanities? We're all trained in the humanities to some extent. How do we look at them today where there is this pressure from students, from parents, from maybe even the workplace to say, you know, get us the technology, get us the data science, get us the social emotional intelligence, and get it to us now?
So shame on us as a society for rushing people through the best years of their lives. And they only know it's the best year of their lives 10 years out of college, when they realize what a luxury I had to be able to study and read and think and converse with my colleagues and my professors. And so I think all of those rankings that look at 6 or 9 months out of college, first job, are folly. Because what's important to me is how we educate and train students for the second and third jobs. Are they promotable? Do they have the requisite habits of mind to be successful in an office, in a corporation, in an agency, in a school or university? The first job is the easy job to get. it's getting promoted that is more difficult. So yes, you're absolutely right. The baccalaureate is becoming a degree on the way to the master's degree. In higher education, we call that degree creep. And so students are expected now not only to have a baccalaureate, but to have a graduate degree as well. And so what we're doing at Yeshiva University is creating pathways for students who graduate with a baccalaureate to be able to enter our graduate programs and attain a master's degree in 1 or 2 years after that, depending on the degree and the course of study. And so, you know, is graduate education important? Yes, it's important, because once again, it's another year or two of maturity, and it's another year or two of skills development. And what students and parents tell us is that they want to be job ready when they graduate from college. And that means that we have to think, we as faculty have to think about how we work with technologists, how we construct a syllabus, how we deliver information and encourage students to find that information for themselves, how we work with them on writing, on working in teams. People don't work independently anymore in jobs. They work in teams. If they've never played a sport, for example, a team sport, which I highly recommend, if as a parent and as an educator, they've never worked in teams, depended on someone and had someone depend on them, they'll be less successful in the job marketplace. So, you know, I'm one of these people who stayed in school for as long as I could and never regretted a minute of it. So I didn't have that pressure. Luckily, I did not have that pressure to kind of get out quickly. But I want to go back to this notion of a very complicated world that we live in. And if we don't help students understand that world, so that they're independent-minded people who can make contributions to it, we are worse off as a society.
I would argue along those lines for greater institutional support for faculty training to learn how to promote relevancy of one's discipline. By and large, more and more students are in our class, for instance, that don't need to take our class. So how do we reach those students and not relegate them to the back of the classroom on a laptop and then say, why are those students in the back of my classroom on a laptop? But this comes from training, and that comes from institutional support, because as well, employers are asking for these things. I recently saw an interview with someone who teaches at the Kellogg School of Management for a company called IDEO, and he knowingly hires sociologists and qualitative researchers, and I said, wow, this is great, this is amazing. I was a sociology major undergrad, and I just loved it, and it taught me how to work with so many diverse types of people. So it is out there, and doctors more and more need to take communication classes and learn interpersonal skills, because it's no longer acceptable to just be a scholar of cardiology, because your patients are increasingly diverse. I think higher ed also has to work closer in conjunction with K-12 and understand what are they getting there, and then what are we delivering next to them. We have to always keep in mind curriculum, but by and large it comes down to the work in the trenches, the work in the classroom. One of my most memorable undergrad experiences was in something called a junior-senior science. I had no idea why I had to take it, but I waited till my very last semester, and it was the best class I took. Was I intimidated by a medical school doctor teaching undergrads? Yes, but she made the class so relevant and engaging, and understood really who we are. So that, I believe, speaks to what I spoke to earlier with the role of the faculty member as being someone who helps create learning experiences versus passing on content that might be on Google.
So I just want to say one other thing, and that is we're talking about students learning, we're talking about students evolving, faculty learn and evolve as well. And so to leave that out of the equation is to tell only part of the story. Faculty are continually thinking about the classroom, not only about the historical period they're working on or the physical, or the physics equation they're trying to solve. They're really thinking about the students in the classroom and how they can evolve to be better teachers and better learners themselves.
No, I think it's a great point, because I think our recent alumni and current students who are in the room were feeling a little pressure that we were focused on them only, that they have to stay in school for longer. And I think it is interesting, and that part of this conversation has to involve you, has to include you in saying, well, that's very nice, but I want to go and do this, and I'm ready to move there, and I'm ready to go to next. And so it has to be this iterative process between students and faculty, where sometimes we as administrators say, okay, give us the instruction and help us to channel how we help you to achieve success, because that's where the magic of higher education is that interaction between the faculty member and the student, and vice versa. So don't think you're off the hook. You guys got to participate too. One of the opportunities that we have in this day and age, theorists such as Clayton Christensen, going back to 2011 when it comes to his book on disruptive innovation in higher education, but before that, going back to '99 and his thesis on how innovation comes in this day and age, and now going back 18 to 20 years. Technology has the ability to reshape the higher education model, and new institutions are adopting these models over the past couple decades. Some of them have reached maturity. We heard Rabbi Lord Sachs mentioning that MOOCs were the biggest thing, massive open online courses with millions and millions of students in a class. And then they did a study and asked how many people persisted through the course, and something like 7% of the course made it through. Now, if you have a class of 1 million students and 7% make it through, that's pretty good. That we find that this doesn't always work, that you do sometimes need that connection. So could you speak possibly about some of these models, where we are with them, what's happening, and maybe possibly what's on the horizon for next, so that our students, so that our faculty, so that our larger continuum of education, you mentioned K through 12, but we really say beyond age 24 or 25 throughout, right? One of the studies now is that the retirement community is looking for new educational opportunities, possibly to be retrained and go back into the workforce, whether part-time, working from home, whatever it is. Feeling that they want to be productive, sometimes feeling that they need to be productive in order to provide for their families and and the next generation. So what are some of the modalities that we can take advantage of as higher education institutions?
Some universities are actually creating senior living communities right on the campuses in order to engage seniors in continuous learning, and because they realize that they want a community. Rabbi Sachs was talking about the importance of community. They realize that, especially as people grow older and seeing their friend group sort of depart the world, they need increasingly a community. So that's a kind of, at the other end of the spectrum, innovation. So I think Clayton Christensen's work is wonderful. And it's wonderful. I think the whole notion of disruption is positive. People think of the word disruption and they think, oh my goodness, this must mean something is wrong, that we have to go back to the status quo because that has worked. What Clayton Christensen is encouraging us to do is to use technology as a way to rethink the way we're doing things. And what we hear from students is that students want, no longer do they want generic master's degrees, for example, a master's degree in political science or in American history or in business. They want specific tailored master's degrees that will help them build on what they learned in undergraduate school or what they may have missed in undergraduate school. So they do want increased education, but not of the generic kind. And that's why, you know, people are rethinking the MBA and the JD and even the MD in the way they teach students. So I think that it is to our advantage to rethink the way we segment knowledge. A history department, a sociology department, a psychology department. Is that the way of the future? Or should we say, let's look at the social sciences, or let's look at entrepreneurship and how it infiltrates all of the disciplines, whether it's physics or chemistry or taxation or, you know, sociology. And I think those conversations will be the next generation of conversations that we have in higher education.
I'm all for it. I mean, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I think we see the parallel also in the business world when it comes to products and services. Consumers want things that are tailored to them. So it's no surprise that in higher education, students will want that as well. Any graduate, any new employee will understand that your job description is one thing. The task at hand in the changing world will be another. So how adaptable are you? And then that speaks to, at least in my field, being flexible flexible and adaptive as an educator, which we know technology to be. Again, so I think those are, you know, very exciting
Great.
Changes on the horizon, and I think that as well as having the recent graduates have transferable skills, that faculty can have transferable skills and meet those challenges, and the learning management system is certainly here to assist them and facilitate interaction. Like Dr. Botman mentioned early on, the beauty of today's classroom really is that interaction can be facilitated outside, and I really see wonderful work with faculty engaging learners as the world is changing through our learning management system Canvas. They're able to meet those real world demands and opportunities in real time. It's very exciting for the students and for them.
One of the modalities that is out there now and is starting to get a little bit of play, Paul LeBlanc, who's the president of Southern New Hampshire University, who is a close colleague with Christensen, as we just mentioned, he decided that with his team to launch something called College for America. And instead of looking at the business to consumer, which is what we do, we look at students and we have a one-on-one relationship with a student, they decided to move to the business-to-business opportunities and competency-based education. And look at partnering with institutions that are out there. So if you're doing the health sciences, for example, and you look at Aetna Health, and you look at 50,000 employees, having a relationship with a corporate entity and saying we will go in and do training and help them to get their next level, whether it's a bachelor's or an associate's degree or a master's or a certificate or a badge or so on and so forth, and looking at education beyond the institution itself, not sitting there at an institution, not even sitting on our own website, right? You can imagine not learning at Yeshiva University without coming to our campus, without even using one of our online modalities, but our partnership with another organization, another institution, and being there. And we can imagine, right, how our education might expand, not just geographically, in exponential ways, but even within different institutions. And I think that's an exciting opportunity for all of us to be thinking about. And I just want to segue that to perhaps one last question. You both work at Yeshiva University and do an incredible job, I might say. And what kinds of things, we've been talking a lot about the theory of what's out there and what's being done. What kinds of things can we expect that we're doing now at YU that maybe people don't know about, maybe I don't know about, but maybe people don't know about out there? What kinds of things are we doing now? And where are we going at Yeshiva University? What's our sort of next that people should hear about, that people should learn about, that people should expect from us in the coming years?
So I just want to make one comment about the business-to-business approach, and that raises the question in my mind, who's responsible for education? Is it the student? Is it the family? Is it the university? Or is it the employer? Is it a combination of all of that? That's a conversation as a society we need to have. And so I welcome it because, I think if we can deliver the skills and knowledge and dispositions that employers need, then our own students will benefit.
But can I ask you on that? Is it just the skills and knowledge, or for example, what if philosophy or history or psychology can be taught in the workplace as well, right? Isn't that an opportunity as well?
So again, we have to work collaboratively with those responsible, what they need from us. And there's a lot of history and philosophy that is taught in business and in science, as well as in, traditional history and philosophy courses. We just don't call it that. So what we're trying to do is create broad-minded, you called it adaptable, I agree, flexible minds who can go into an employment situation with one set of responsibilities and morph into another as they grow and as the demands of the field change. So what are we doing at Yeshiva? So let me preface it by saying that in this very difficult time in higher education, small colleges are actually closing. They're withering. They're closing. We are not in that situation. We are building. We are growing. We are creating new master's degrees that students want, that the market needs. We are creating project-based learning, which means that our faculty are offering students real live problems for them to work on. It's very exciting for students. So when they get into the workplace, they know how to work in teams. They know how to attack a problem. It broadens the mind. There are faculty who are working across the disciplines, and we're encouraging deans of the different schools and colleges to work together so that an English student might decide to do a Master of Social Work, and what's the pathway for that student to be able to accomplish that education. We want to create a startup lab at Yeshiva University where companies actually come and provide us with their problems to solve. And students and faculty will work on those problems and deliver solutions to a small company that might not have the human or material resources to accomplish that, to solve that problem. And so, we're offering students much in the way of global studies, and so people will understand how to think about the world we live in, which increasingly is all of our obligation and responsibility.
To piggyback, I would also argue, or not argue, but state, as a matter of fact, that we're really just asking the tough questions here. Some of those questions are how to use technology in a very traditional class or environment with a very traditional conservative population. Other faculty members ask questions such as, why would I use technology in a face-to-face classroom? And this is great. Inquiry is considered certainly a sign of intellect among many of us. So the most important thing is that we're confronting these issues and we're navigating them. And I think that's the best that we can possibly be doing.
Teach your child in his or her own way, says the book of Proverbs in chapter 22. Ultimately, it's our responsibility, each one of us, for our own educations. It's our responsibility as being part of a family to be involved in education, part of a community, and we certainly view Yeshiva University as part of our community and part of your community. And we thank you all for being here with us today as we engage some of these questions about how we are going to continue to teach each child in her or his own way. Again, we thank you for participation, and we welcome you to go on to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.